Tetris, an inescapable phenomenon. It's easy to wonder, how did something with such a simple concept and design gather so much popularity? How did a game about falling blocks become such a pop culture icon? Well, it all starts with Soviet Russia and a man named Alexei Pajitnov. He was an engineer doing research work at a Soviet computing center. Alexei was tasked with testing the capabilities of newly developed hardware. He decided to go about doing this by writing simple computer games for the hardware to run. Somewhere down the line, June 6, 1984, the first playable version of Tetris was completed, and the rest is history. The game was very popular with his colleagues, and as you might expect, his coworkers' friends picked up on it, and then their friends picked up on it, and before you know it, all of Moscow is playing Tetris. And before you know it, it's picked up by a company you've probably never heard of in Budapest, and, well, to make a long story short, it ends up on the Nintendo Game Boy and becomes a massive hit. So what is Tetris? Well, I don't really think I need to explain this, but just in case, you've got a screen and you've got some pieces falling from the top of that screen. These pieces are tetronymos, the 7 different combinations of 4 blocks put together. You don't want the pieces to pile up to the top, so to get rid of these blocks you must complete a whole row of pieces on the grid with no holes or gaps. You get points for clearing lines, and you get more points for clearing more lines at one time. It's important to keep your board organized so you don't end up with a bunch of holes that make it difficult to clear your way back down to the bottom. And that's essentially the basic gameplay of Tetris. And at this point, it's already really addictive and captivating. There's something just so satisfying about putting the pieces together perfectly and setting up those sought-after 4-line clears. But the game gets so much more fun than just placing blocks. It's really the speed at which these blocks come down that makes this game so fun. It's all about the thrill factor. The game starts out nice and slow, allowing for gameplay that anyone can handle. The pieces are coming down slow enough so you have plenty of time to really put thought into where you're placing it. However, as you clear more lines, the rate at which the pieces drop increases, putting a lot more pressure on the player to think quickly rather than being able to take their sweet old time. The intensity created by speeding up the gameplay is what makes Tetris super exciting to play. The faster the pieces fall, the more difficult the game gets. Luckily, Tetris's progression system is actually perfectly designed for accommodating players of all different skill levels. The game only speeds up after you've cleared a designated amount of lines, so the slower you clear those lines, the slower the game will speed up. And if you're able to breeze through the early levels of the game will speed up significantly faster. This gives more experienced players a more difficult challenge much faster than it would give the same level of challenge to newer players. This makes it so that new and less experienced players can still have a chance to play and practice on the early levels of the game and don't have to initially deal with levels of difficulty suited for Tetris experts. What's important here is that the game gets harder as you get better. One thing that's talked about a lot in the game design world is the idea of the difficulty curve. The basic idea is that a game should get more difficult as you progress through it to keep your player engaged. If you keep things the same level of difficulty, then the player will quickly master the game and become bored. On the other hand, if the game is too difficult, then the game becomes really frustrating. The idea is to try and achieve a solid middle ground to make sure that your game is the maximum amount of fun. I like to call this the butter zone. The thing about Tetris's difficulty curve is that it is always tailored to the specific person playing the game. The game gets faster if you can play faster, and the game stays slower if you can't go super fast yet. Tetris's difficulty curve constantly has you in a state where gameplay may be difficult but achievable. While you're playing, the game will be pushing you to higher and higher levels, all within your skill level. You're never going to hit anything that's too hard for you until you actually finally top out. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that with Tetris, you're always in the butter zone. I'd go as far to say that I think Tetris has the best difficulty curve of any game I've ever played, simply because it's so adaptable. The last point I want to make is that the game has an infinite skill ceiling. You are never going to be able to play Tetris perfectly, and that is a great thing. I've always been a big believer that seeing yourself overcome what used to seem like impossible challenges is one of the most rewarding parts about playing games. It's a sense of pride, and I know my fair share of friends that are very proud of their Tetris skills. Tetris might not be the best game of all time, but it is certainly one of my favorite games to play to just chill out and relax. It's fun, the difficulty always ramps up smoothly, and I love to see myself improve. There's a reason why people today are still playing this 35-year-old game. It's because it's just plain simple and fun, and I don't think any amount of time is going to change that. Tetris is a timeless masterpiece.
17-piece drop, there's the double! There it is!
Tetris for Joseph!
And yours!
And we have a new Tetris World Champion! 16-year-old Joseph Saley has done it!